So we had a question on here recently about how we quote our rewires. I think someone was just keen to know, they're starting out relatively new and looking how to price up that sort of job because it's a bit bigger. Obviously don't want to make many mistakes. So we tend to quote it in two different ways. So we have a price per point style of quoting. And we also, as I've spoken about many times on here before, we have our quoting template as well, of which you can see it's on one pinned on our profile. So you can have a look at that and see how that's laid out as well. But I'm not going to go on about that too much. But the idea is that we quote it in two different manners so we don't get too much difference between, just in case we've missed something in one or the other, so we're not losing out. So the price per point, really you need to set, if it's just starting out, you need to set a price per point that you think is fair, and you have to take into account materials you're using for that particular point and how long you think it's going to take. Now that's largely down to you and your skill levels, time frames, things like that, and the materials that you use. So for example, a socket would be, you have to factor in the socket, the back box, the cable between those 2 points, and various other little things, and that depends on the brand of the socket and all that sort of thing. So that's where a little bit of thought needs to go into it to get that right before you start just saying, per point, and you're completely way off. So you want to get that right to start with, and that goes for lights, smoke alarms, pendants, downlights, all that sort of stuff, to make sure you've got the right price per point. And once you have that list, then you just go through the customer's spec and sort of tally it all up, and you should come out with a relatively sort of accurate cost for the job, because you're not really missing any points. So in theory, if you've calculated it right and looked at the quote and the spec close enough, you should have a fairly accurate cost. The other way we also do it is we will list up all the materials, obviously get a quote from our supplier for the materials in bulk, and then accurate labour time amongst our team, depending on who's on the job, because there's 5 of us, so depending on who we think's needed on that job, or how many of us are needed on that job over that particular amount of days, we will then calculate the material costs or get that back from our suppliers, add the amount of days, and this is where we use our template in this instance. So we will put who we've got on the job in the columns, we will put how much materials cost, the overhead in terms of days, etc., and then our template will calculate it all out for us and give us a figure. So we tend to do both because, just to cover ourselves more than anything, most of the time we want that figure to be pretty much the same. If we've calculated it correctly both ways, the figure should be there or thereabouts the same, and we know if it's not, then we've either missed something off one or the other, so it doesn't quite make sense. You don't have to do both, that's just what we do because it's a bit of a larger scale, especially with the real big ones as well, because you don't want to make mistakes. So that's what we do, just to get a comparison between the two to make sure we're accurate with our quotes. So that's the main thing to do. I mean, I personally, like I said, if you're starting out and you're just I would just pick one probably, just so you know, and it's consistent more than anything. So you've got a consistent pricing structure, whether you go per point or whether you do some sort of template yourself, or you can also buy or download our template as well. So hopefully, actually on another note as well, once we've done the quote, I will lay out on a spec sheet. So we tend to list and itemize everything that the customer has asked for. I've done this in a previous video before, but it kind of looks a bit like this, and there'll be 2 or 3 pages of this basically, and it just laid out per room. I know this is going to be backwards on here, but it's laid out per room, and each one will state the amount of sockets, lights, etc. in each part of the house right the way through. So when it comes to actually doing the job, your customer has a copy, all the team will know what's going in as well, so you'll have everyone's on the same page with regards to what's going in, and it also makes it really clear as well when it comes to extras. So if things have been removed by the customer and they don't want that amount of things anymore, it's quite clear. And also, which is more often than not the case, they're extras. So if they add sockets, switches, lights, all that sort of stuff, you tally it up, and then at the end of the job you can just add it on to those lists that you've got, and it's quite clear to you and them what's been extra, what's been added. So when you're adding extras, it makes it very clear, so you don't get to the end of the job and you just whack on a figure saying, it was this much extra. They will very clearly know that they've had 10 extra sockets, it's going to be this much extra. So we've found over the years that's just made it a lot clearer for us, and they sign that off before the job starts, and you talk through them as the job goes on, and when they're adding things you can just add it on accordingly. So that's basically how we do it. Hopefully that's helpful, and if you've got any follow-up questions on that, then do give us a shout or just drop us a message or something like that. But hopefully that's been helpful, and certainly to the person who asked that question. But so that's how we do it.